From getting noticed by a coach in Lachine at the age of 10 to being called a league-altering talent by NBA executives, this is the rise of Victor Wembanyama. Vic's journey began in Lachine, where he was coached by Michael Allard at just 10 years old. But even before that, Vic was still a young sensation. A giant among other school-going kids, Wembanyama embraced his differences, knowing that it made him unique. He wanted to be original in everything, and he always talks about how he thought differently than everyone else too. In the simplest of explanations, Wemby believes he was born to be one of a kind. And given the unicorn shouts he's been getting for nearly 3 or 4 years now, he probably got that right. But a lot of credit goes to his youth basketball team coach Allard, who describes discovering the young prodigy as a beautiful coincidence. In fact, Allard's first impression of Wemby was that he was an assistant coach. This was due to his extraordinary height and how he was better than every other player on the court. Needless to say, Allard was convinced, and he brought Wemby to Nanterre, which was a club with both youth and professional teams. And it was there that his success story truly kicked off. Victor explained how he's always loved the sport, but winning his first big title, which he did at the age of 13 with Nanterre, truly made him fall in love all over again. He immediately knew that this was his future, and he wanted to play all the time and win all the time. Of course, when you're a young teenager, you can't just give up on school. So Vic had to balance his playing time with studies. In fact, every time he'd get a bad grade on his homework, his parents would ensure that he sits at the scorer's table in the gym and study while his friends played. That would encourage him to get good grades. Not sure if it was a great idea, but it clearly worked, because he knew as long as he was not getting a telling off in his studies, his path to doing what he loves the most was clear. But a special talent like Wembanyama also needed special attention. This was against his parents' wishes, who actually wanted the opposite. Unfortunately, that was a little difficult to achieve. A unicorn like Wembanyama, who stood at nearly 7 feet when he was 14, needed very different attention compared to other kids. When he moved to Nanterre's dormitory at that age, they actually had to get a special bed made just for him. Then there was a fridge installed right next to his high school, so that he'd have easy access to 5 meals a day prepared by a caterer, as per the recommendations of nutritionists to make sure he filled out his frame. In fact, even Wembanyama's coach got to have his office on school premises, and around 25 people were responsible for his physical and mental development. Crazy! But with all this kind of attention to detail, it's insane to think that Wembanyama never got sick of the sport, and his parents deserve a lot of credit for that. You see, despite knowing that their son had all the talent and the resources to become a big name, they never really forced Victor to play basketball. They feared setting him on that path too soon and believed that it'd hinder his growth. Even though his mother had played and coached the game, his parents never discussed basketball at the dinner table and shielded him from the increasing number of media attention and requests for interviews. But if you'd asked the 14-year-old himself, he was ready to sacrifice everything else to play the sport. And to put his insane commitment to the sport into perspective, I'll tell you a story from his playing days in Nanterre. Coaches dealing with sporty teenagers need to be very careful about not overwhelming them. So Michael Burr, one of Wembanyama's coaches back during his days, used to carry out different activities to get their minds off the sport. For instance, he'd ask the players to choose a meaningful word from the same letter as their first name. For Wembanyama, though, it was another way of linking basketball to himself. When he was asked to carry out the exercise, Vic told his coach that his name is Victor, and the letter it starts with is V, which in Roman numerals means 5. And that's because he can play all 5 positions in basketball. Burr was shocked, to put it lightly, and thought to himself how extraordinary it was of a 16-year-old to think like that. But being honest, that was hardly the most impressive thing Wemby was doing at that age. He even trash-talked NBA star and fellow Frenchman Rudy Gobert. Now, you might point out how there's nothing impressive about trash-talking. But see, this one goes a little differently. Like I said, Vic's unique. He didn't only trash-talk an actual NBA player, but he also walked the walk. So, back in 2020, Wembanyama was training with his friend in Nanterre when 2 older French stars came up to them. They were Rudy Gobert and Vincent Poirier, and Gobert had been playing for the Utah Jazz at the time, having won the Defensive Player of the Year award twice. Wemby sensed his opportunity to make a mark, and they challenged the 2 pros to a 2-on-2 game. The video of that game went viral all over social media. First, the fans were surprised to see this teenager hovering above a 7'1" Gobert, and then They were excited at how a 16-year-old Wembanyama consistently scored over Rudy, who, like I pointed out earlier, was a two-time Defensive Player of the Year in the NBA. Gobert was sold. He admired Vic's maturity, saying that it was the most surprising part, given that he was only 16. And since then, the current Timberwolves star has backed Victor to take the NBA by storm. But before we get to the NBA part of his story, let's look at what happened to the young Frenchman after he graduated from high school in 2021. Wembanyama continued his meteoric rise by leaving Asvel, a club he'd temporarily joined, to play for his hometown team, Metropolitans 92. Fans in the city were ecstatic. The arena got sold out for almost every game, and the biggest attraction was obviously the 7'3" giant Wembanyama, who was effortlessly defending buckets without even leaving the floor. Despite his lanky frame, he'd glide over to the offensive side to score with ease too. Some fans discussed how they wanted to see as much of Victor as possible because they knew he'd end up leaving France for the US very soon, where he's already made a huge mark with those big performances against the G League Ignite. Those were the performances that officially put Wembanyama's hype on the map in the USA as well. The mainstream audience of America got their first look at this alien specimen who destroyed the Ignite side, led by America's most popular star of the next draft class, Scoot Henderson. Even though Wembanyama's team lost the first game, he scored 37 points, making 7 shots from beyond the arc, while coming up with 5 blocks too. In the second fixture, Wemby led his team to a win, scoring 36 points, grabbing 11 rebounds, and getting 4 blocks. The hype in the aftermath of that game was outrageous. I mean, what more can you possibly expect? The biggest names in the NBA were caught off guard by what they'd seen. LeBron James said that Vic wasn't a unicorn, rather he was more like an alien. Giannis Antetokounmpo called him incredible, implying that Vic was leading the next line of players, while the chef, Steph Curry, couldn't believe what he'd seen. The 4-time NBA champ said that if you created the perfect player on NBA 2K, it'd look like Wemby. Kevin Durant, meanwhile, issued a warning to the rest of the NBA, saying that the league's gonna be in trouble when the young Frenchman finally arrives, and he's not wrong at all. Think about it for a minute. He's being called a league-altering talent. The usual term to define stars of similar potential impact is franchise-altering talents, but an unnamed NBA exec went a step ahead and said that Wembanyama is a league-altering talent. He suggested in the summer of 2022 that teams will tank like never before just to have the best chance of getting the #1 pick in 2023's NBA draft, and it was a great call. Even the Dallas Mavericks tanked toward the end of the season, to the point where they made it a little too obvious and got fined for it. The fact is, every NBA team wants a piece of Victor. The Frenchman, on the other hand, has made it explicitly clear that he doesn't like teams losing just to sign a player, but I guess he still has some way to go before understanding what franchises and the NBA truly thinks of him. Because teams are ready to throw out their existing rosters if it means getting Wemby and building a team around him. But only one side will be so lucky. So, from being labeled a league-altering talent to getting noticed by a coach at the age of 10, this was all about the rise of Victor Wembanyama.